guys, what is up? My name is Megan. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I hope you guys are doing well and staying safe, and welcome to the kickoff video of my fall series on my channel, where we are going to be talking about mystery and thriller books I think are perfect to read during fall. The rest of the fall recommendations will be in a different video, where I'm going to talk about fantasy, romance, literary fiction. All of that will be in a separate video. Also keep in mind that these recommendations are based off young adult and adult books. Middle grade books that I think you should read in the fall will also have their own video. There will be a lot of exciting things coming your way in the upcoming month and a half. I have a lot of ideas and I think it's going to be a really fun time. I am 110% in the mood for fall. So without further ado, let's just hop on in. So these recommendations are in no particular order whatsoever. It's going to be a blend of adult, young adult, whatever comes first. It's not in preference order or in order of young adult to adult. None of that is happening. It is a little bit chaotic here. The first book I want to recommend is an adult mystery thriller. I think it's more of a thriller than a mystery, and I spoke about it in my Mexico vlog as well as my June wrap-up if you want to hear more of my thoughts on it. But it is The Last Word by Taylor Adams, who is the author of No Exit, which is very popular and also very much recommended here on BookTube. The Last Word essentially follows a book reviewer who gives a book a 1-star review. The author kind of confronts her on it. She's like, I'm not gonna budge. Like, reviewing is for readers, not for writers. And then creepy stuff starts to happen. Our main character is put in danger, and this book is just incredibly atmospheric. It also surrounds books, and I love the discussions on books, and it felt very fall all in all. I think because this is set during like the off season on an island where there's water and there's not many people around, feels very fall, and it's just such a fun thing to binge read in a weekend with like a nice warm cup of hot chocolate. It will keep you on the edge of your seat, and it's just a really fun time. There are, however, several trigger warnings for this. I talk about the trigger warnings more in my June wrap-up if you were interested, but it's definitely one of my favorite thrillers I've read in a really long time, and so I highly recommend. The next book I have recommended over and over again, but I feel like I haven't talked about on my channel for a while, so I'm bringing it back, and that is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This is like my OG favorite thriller. It's the book that got me into reading mystery thrillers. This one is definitely more of a mystery with some thrilling elements rather than specifically a thriller, at least for me. This is a book that follows a multitude of different characters who are all together on this secluded island for a wedding, and essentially at the beginning of this book a murder occurs, and then you are sent back in time, and then everything kind of happens and they all lead to the murder, and you kind of see a bunch of different people's perspectives. Everybody is kind of sus, and it's just the atmosphere again in this book, a secluded island. Like, you could just see the vibes by this cover, and I just think that the multiple perspectives that were used in this book is what really makes it super fun. Again, it just is something you could curl up with a blanket and read and enjoy yourself, you know, light some little candles, and it's a whole vibe. And I was really not disappointed by the ending of this, and I just felt like it was very action-packed, and it wasn't something that took a long time for you to like get into, and that's why I recommend it. And I just, all the point of views made this book so different in my opinion. This, however, is the only Lucy Foley I recommend. I've read The Paris Apartment. I don't recommend that one. Another book I want to recommend you can actually read on Kindle Unlimited if you have KU. If not, you can also like buy it on Kindle or read it, borrow it from your library, and that is Never Lie. This is by like the author of all the like super popular thriller books that have been spoken about on BookTube and TikTok, all of it. And this one was a really fun one. It's basically about this couple who are going to see a house, and they get stuck in this huge storm, and it turns out the owner of this house was I believe she's a psychiatrist or psychologist who has went missing, and they find a bunch of recordings of her past sessions. Well, actually the woman we follow does, and it's like her listening to them, trying to figure out what happened, and then hiding it from her husband, and it's just this whole thing. I don't want to say too much about that one, but it was a really fun one. I read it super quickly, and I think a lot of these authors' books will probably fit the bill. Like, if it's not that one that's interesting to you, there are a lot of other ones, but just this author in general feels like a really great recommendation for fall. Then we have an obvious recommendation, which is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, as well as Five Survive, which I don't have a copy with me of, but Five Survive is the standalone book from Holly Jackson, which follows a bunch of teens that go in an RV for spring break. They get stranded, there's a shooter outside the RV, and they need to figure out why they're being targeted. It all happens in the span of like 12 or 24 hours, and only 5 survive, hence the title. And A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is very well known, but I cannot not recommend this. This follows a main character named Pip, who for her senior project is going to look into a criminal case that happened in her town where this girl got murdered, and everybody pegged it on her ex-boyfriend without there being any concrete proof. And so she starts digging and trying to find out the truth about that murder, and obviously it ruffles a lot of feathers being in a small town, and stuff starts to happen to our main character. It is amazing. This is the first book in a trilogy, and it is just fantastic. I won't go into too much more detail because I feel everybody has talked about this book, but if you have yet to check it out and are trying to get into mysteries, this is a really good one. Obviously this is YA, as was Five Survive. I also cannot go through this video without recommending my queen, which is Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and one of my recommendations for her is the Natural series. These are the old covers. I read this first 6 years ago, and it is kind of gaining popularity again on Book Talk and BookTube, I guess, because of the other series I will recommend by her. But this is essentially Criminal Minds in a YA format. We essentially follow a bunch of teens who are gifted in all things that would be useful to the FBI, like profiling. There's just so many things, and so we follow them as they try to solve cold cases using their intelligence. It's also kind of a romantic triangle. It's very much Jennifer Lynn Barnes as a whole. This series is amazing. There's 4 books, and there's kind of like this big underlying mystery that follows the plot throughout those 4 books. And I just think that if you want a fun, fast-paced mystery that you're not like super afraid of like reading, like I get spooked easily, and I found like this was just the perfect balance, and the writing style and the pace is very quick, and I cannot recommend this enough. Also, my review for that book, which I posted literally 6 years ago, is now gaining traction on BookTube, and it's quite horrifying. Don't go watch that video, please. The other series I wanted to recommend by Jennifer Lynn Barnes is obviously the Inheritance Games. This is her most popular series, and I think what has made it a possibility for her to keep writing full-time. It follows a main character who is very much down on her luck. She doesn't have a lot of money, not a lot of family, and she's struggling to get through school even though she is a very talented and gifted student. In comes this weird man who's like, you have like billions of dollars in inheritance waiting for you. She thinks it's a scam, and then she's like, what do I have to lose? Follows this man and gets entered to this family of very rich people who do not understand who she is. She doesn't understand her connection to the family, and essentially she needs to live with this family for a year in order to be able to access her inheritance. People are not happy. People try to kill her. She needs to solve a bunch of riddles. It is also a love triangle between her and 2 of the boys who lived in this family. We follow, are there 4 or 5 Hawthorne brothers? Anyways, it's a whole thing. It's amazing. Again, it's super fast paced. I love the riddle element in this mystery, and it's just so endearing. And if you are like me and you like romance and pretty much all your books, this is a really good blend of mystery and romance because everybody has a ship. Are you a Jameson ship? Are you a Grayson ship? Either or, you're invested in the story as well because you want to know how it ends. This is a trilogy, and it is great. Fall vibes as well. I absolutely love it. In the same veins of another popular YA series that I think is really fun to read in the fall is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is like a 4 or 5 book series, and it follows a main character who goes to this elite kind of private school in the woods. It's very atmospheric, and at that specific place where she goes to school, there was a murder like years and years ago, and I think it remains unsolved, and it was signed Truly Devious, and our main character kind of investigates while she's there, and that gets her into a lot of difficult moments, you know, because she's sneaking around things people don't want to bring up, and we see her go to school. It's just the perfect blend of like going to school and like academia vibes mixed with a fun YA mystery. There's also some romance sprinkled in there, friendship groups. It's a whole fun time, and I think a lot of people have read this, but if you are new to BookTube or BookTok, you may not have heard of this series, and it's one that it's an easy recommendation. Everybody enjoys that one. A more random recommendation that I don't see anybody talk about is the Cinderella Murder by Mary Higgins Clark. I don't usually read her books, and I had picked that one up on a whim in a free little library, and this ended up being really fun. This essentially, from what I can remember, follows a main character who either works for the FBI or she works like privately to solve investigations, and it's a Cinderella murder because I believe there was a shoe left behind at the scene. I don't remember a lot of this book, and I'm probably doing very poorly at pitching it to you, but if you trust me, at least go look at the description on Goodreads. I don't want to spoil too much because I do remember some bits and pieces, but again, I think it's a TV show actually where they solve like unsolved murders, unsolved cases. It very much fits the vibe of all of my recommendations, and it's one that I really think should be given a shot. This is part of a series, so if you enjoy it, there's other books you can read, and I think the writing and the pacing and the characters in that one were incredibly well done, and I personally really enjoy it. So if you haven't heard of it and you want something new to try, definitely give this one a shot. Yet another very classic recommendation is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is actually the only Riley Sager book I have read thus far. I don't know how many of his books I want to read or which ones I should read next, but this one is kind of like a haunted house thriller, and it follows this family who has purchased this home, and then weird stuff starts happening, and you're trying to figure out, is it paranormal, is someone behind it, like what is happening to this creepy house? And there is a book within a book in this story as well, and I just feel like Riley Sager is very well known for his thrillers. Lock Every Door is very well known, Home Before Dark, just pretty much all of his backlist. So if you haven't read Riley Sager, I recommend Home Before Dark, but you can start kind of wherever, and I feel like you'd be satisfied with his books. Some of them are a little bit less beloved than others, but I think it's a pretty sure shot if you haven't tried them yet. Another book I read a few years ago and still think about a lot is Darling Rose Gold, and it's basically taking the story of a mother who poisons her daughter to keep caring for her, based off the real story, and it essentially follows our main character when she figures it out, and then kind of like the aftermath and her relationship with her mother when she comes out of jail. It is a very interesting read. I don't necessarily know if it would be a mystery or a thriller, but I kind of categorize it with this, and I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this book in the recent years. So if that concept of like harming people you love to care for them and for them to be dependent on you interests you, this book was fabulous. It was very like edge of your seat. What is our main character gonna do? Is she gonna take revenge on her mom? Is she gonna welcome her back in her life? And all of that. It was bloody fantastic. Another book which started making the rounds again but was published a few years ago is The Night Swim by Megan Golden. This is about a main character who has a podcast, and she talks about like ongoing trial cases and just, you know, what people do with true crime podcasts. And she is kind of asked by this woman to help her solve like a case of what happened in this town, and her main character kind of gets involved in that. The reason people are talking about this book again is because a sequel called Dark Corners has also come out in 2023. I have yet to read that one, but I absolutely loved The Night Swim, specifically for the podcasting element. It kind of reminded me of the vibes of Sadie. If you haven't read that, it is also a recommendation I would make. That one is a YA book, and it's just really a fun time. I really liked the way the book was formatted, the podcasting element. I'm assuming it would be a great audiobook as well, but I read that one physically, so couldn't tell you. But again, it's really one that kept me on the edge of my seat, and it was a fun, different kind of vibe for me. I have two recommendations left. One of them is actually Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This book is heartbreaking, but is wonderful as well. This is more of a mystery than a thriller. It's very like, it sucks you in and then you kind of want to know what happens. This follows a main character who's named Enchanted, and basically she, at the beginning of this book, wakes up with blood on her hands, and then her producer, I believe, is dead. Essentially, Enchanted is a singer and her producer is dead. There's a lot of things happening and a lot of conversations about young women and young girls in the music industry and how gross things can happen. And it's just, when people are famous, you kind of give them the benefit of the doubt, but then it's like the nasty things behind music production. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but if you have not read this book, I beg of you to read this book, because it's both very heart-wrenching and it talks about real societal issues, but it's also a fun mystery, and you kind of really want to know what happens to our main character. So basically it goes back in time, and then we learn her story, and then kind of have to figure out who has murdered the producer. And yeah, it talks about a lot of things, and it really makes you reflect. Tiffany D. Jackson has an incredible writing style. This is YA, but I recommend it for basically anyone. Yeah, you need to read this book. And the last recommendation is also kind of a little odd and out there, but it's actually Ace of Spades by Amanda Foody. This is actually a fantasy book, but it also has a lot of like mysterious elements in here. And I just wanted to talk about this one very briefly, because our main character basically gets herself in a lot of sketchy situations in this, which is what makes it very thrilling. It follows a main character whose name is N.A., and she is living in the city of Sin. When her mom goes missing, she basically leaves everything behind to find out what happened to her, and that's kind of where chaos ensues. She gets with some sketchy people to find the truth about her mom, and things spiral. This is a trilogy that is not very like hyped or talked about. Even when it came out, I feel like a few people talked about it, but no one really, you know, gave the entire trilogy a chance. I highly recommend this. It was a great action-packed time. It's fantasy but mystery as well, so if you're more of a fantasy reader who's looking to get into more mysterious books, this is definitely a really fun one. Again, I didn't really do the description justice, but you should look on Goodreads for this, and I swear you will have a really fun time. At one point I actually wanted to make a read-along for the series, so if it's something you're interested in, let me know. But just either way, you should actually consider this. Yeah, it's really fun, really fun. It also has like gambling and, you know, the city of Sin. It's a whole fun time. So those were all my recommendations of mystery and thriller books that you should read this fall. Again, I will have more recommendation videos for other types of books coming to you soon. And yeah, subscribe if you don't want to miss it, and just thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye guys!